Montana's only statewide sports talk show. Broadcast on 102.9 ESPN Radio for Western Montana and across the state on SWX Television.
I like football!
Now, the 2017 Radio Sports Broadcaster of the Year on the show with back-to-back Montana Broadcaster Association awards for sports coverage and award-winning sports journalism. Here is Ryan Tutel and Colter Nuanez.
Anyways, welcome in. Tutel Nuanez, 129 ESPN Missoula. Broadcasting to you live from the Kurtz Polaris Studios. Kurtz Polaris, 2904 West Broadway in Missoula, or Highway 83 in Sealy. Online at kurtzpolaris.com. If you want to find us on the internet, 1029ESPN.com. That's where you can find the live stream. Live stream is presented to you by Opportunity Bank. Your local bank, your opportunity. You also can find the podcast there. That's archived each and every day. Just click on the podcast tab. The podcast presented to you by the Wingate by Wyndham. And if you want to give us a call, we got a good show for you today, 329-1899. All guests join us via the Rangich Brothers RV phone line. The 2017 Broadcaster of the Year, Ryan Tutel, he is not here. He is on the other side of the globe, as far away as you can be, 7,700 miles and change. I don't even know if he's actually off his plane. I was predicting that by the time he got off his plane in the Philippines, he probably just took his cell phone and launched it into the ocean. He's probably not going to even be anywhere near have the ability to communicate with us. But in the meantime, I got a bunch of my friends lined up to help me out with the show this week, starting with my main guy, Sean Rainey from SWX Television, ABC Fox. Rain Man, thanks for doing it.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Show Outlook brought to you by Lithia Ford Missoula. We're going to talk a little bit about Sean, his history in Missoula sports, and just what led him to Montana and why he's decided to make this place home, and all the cool stuff they got going on over there at SWX. We're also going to talk a little bit of sports betting. If you didn't hear last week, the Governor Bullock passed one of two bills that was presented to him, legalizing sports betting in Montana. So now 8 states across the union have legalized sports betting. Montana, the first one to do it in 2019. So we'll talk about some of the advantages of that, some of the disadvantages, some of the maybe places we have to be cautious as a state that does not have pro sports teams, the way that's going to affect our college sports. If you didn't hear, everybody's talking about is the Kentucky Derby on Saturday, and perhaps the most controversial Kentucky Derby we have had. It's definitely, the Kentucky Derby usually dominates the sports landscape for a day. This is the first time I can remember it dominating the conversation for multiple days into the following week. Some controversy for sure, as Maximum Security disqualified, and the second longest shot to ever win the Derby awarded the win, even though the horse didn't technically win the race. So we'll get into that as well. Tucker Sargent, University of Montana lacrosse coach, going to join us at 4:45. University of Montana men's lacrosse. They lost in their first round of the MCLA tournament this morning, 10-7 to Dayton. Dayton, the number 4 seed, Montana, the number 13 seed. But the Grizz fought valiantly. They led for the first 3 quarters of that game, and a late barrage by Dayton lifted the Flyers in the next round. So we'll catch up with Tucker about that, recapping their great season and just what it was like coaching in the national tournament. Hour number 2, that's when we hit our wheelhouse. We're going to talk some NBA. I usually make Ryan talk about the NBA. I know he likes it, but he doesn't love it. Rain Man loves the NBA. So I got a bunch of hypothetical questions for Sean, and we'll give you a recap of everything that happened over the weekend. And then we'll also get into some prep, track, and field, and maybe touch on the Little Sullivan Awards as well. Those were given away over the weekend. Show Outlook brought to you by Lithia Ford of Missoula. And if you haven't been listening to the show, you don't know where Ryan's at. But if you have been listening, you know Ryan is out of town. Ryan Tutel is on vacation in the Philippines for the next 2 full weeks. His family has been down there for a full month already. So he's going to reunite with them and get a little culture and see what that part of the world has to offer, and probably be very hot for most of the time. But I'm sure he's having a great time down there. But in the meantime, keep it tuned right here, 102.9 ESPN Missoula. We got a ton of stuff. I got more free stuff than we've ever had in this show to give away to you guys. We're going to be giving away a whitewater rafting giveaway from Adventure Montana over the next 2 weeks. This week, fellas, I know you haven't bought your mother a Mother's Day present yet. I know you're behind. I know everybody is. I haven't done it yet either. We're always going to be procrastinators. But I got 3 different Soul Skin gift cards, and so you can go hook your mom up with a facial, a spa day, whatever you might need. And then, of course, we're going to be giving away some Alpine Touch later on. I got some Tagliari gift cards leading up to the Big Sky Conference Outdoor Track and Field Championships here in Missoula as well. So keep it here. We got a bunch of free stuff for you. And another tease later on in the week, I got our ESPN Roundtable for the week actually already busted out this morning. I was down at the University of Montana campus and interviewed 4 outstanding female track and field athletes from the University of Montana track team. Hannah Filzer, who's a Missoula Big Sky product from right here in Missoula. She won the Big Sky Field Athlete of the Week for a school record 7th time this outdoor season alone. Also was there with Erica McLeod, one of the most decorated track stars in the history of the University of Montana. She's the champion pentathlete who set the pentathlon record of the indoors, and now she'll be competing in the heptathlon in her final multi-events of her decorated Grizz career. Also was joined by Morgan Solser, star hurdler out of Billings Senior, and Carly Smidala from Helena High, one of the top 800 runners in the conference. And it was a great conversation. I know that those girls have poured their heart and soul into that program. I know it's going to be a really cool and probably bittersweet experience for them this week. First time the Big Sky Outdoor Track and Field Championships have been in Missoula since 2008. So really cool experience for 4 different Montana girls and a whole bunch of other Montanans on both sides of the Montana and Montana State men's and women's teams to host that outdoor meet here. So we'll have coverage for that leading up to and throughout the rest of the week as well. So go check that out. It's down at Dorn Blazer Field starting on Wednesday all the way through Saturday, and some of the best athletes you've ever watched. If you've never been to a championship track meet, they're cool. They are really, really cool. Have you ever covered an indoor and outdoor championship, Sean?
Not for the Big Sky.
Yeah, so
because there hasn't been here.
Right. So the indoors have been in Bozeman. I've actually never covered the outdoor. I covered the outdoor one time when I was in the Chronicle in Bozeman. Still, the outdoors were in Bozeman in 2011. That's the last time they've been in Montana. Period. It's almost a decade for the state of Montana at all. But I've covered 3 different indoor meets in Bozeman, and it's an extravaganza, man. There's stuff going on all over the place, events going on all around you, and some of the great athletes you'll see anywhere. But Sean's been on the show multiple times. Everybody that's listening, you probably have seen him on your local newscast, ABC Fox Montana, SWX Tonight. But they've been doing a bunch of cool stuff over at SWX. And, you know, as news guys, we get to talk about ourselves so much on this show because it's just a talk show. Whereas, you're sitting there in your suit and tie, you're buttoned up. You're never going to really tell people your story. But I've known you for a long time, going all the way back to our college days, playing hoops at the rec center at the University of Montana. But how long? I thought this was interesting the other day because we were golfing together, and somebody asked you where you were from, and you said, well, now I basically consider myself from Montana. So you've been here long enough that you kind of consider yourself a Montana. But tell us a little bit about your history. Where you grew up in San Diego, when did you move to Missoula, and what's kind of the last 10 years of your life looked like?
Yeah, I grew up an hour east of San Diego. It was kind of a small town of Julian, California, famous for apple pies, but it was a mountain town, so it was like 4,000 feet, so it snowed and everything. And actually had some family friends, the Klusowiczes, who we're going to talk about their youngest son, Jace, later on in the show. They moved to Missoula, and so I visited when I was in junior high and high school, went to a game and stuff, and always knew about Missoula, knew about Montana, and then I always just knew that I wanted to get into broadcast journalism. And so I moved here for school in 2007, met my wife in 2008, and started in the sports business in 2010, and then I've just been kind of started at our station in the fall of 2011 before we even had a studio in the building. We literally I would just show up and shoot some highlights, do some stories, and send it all to Great Falls, and it would all be broadcast out of Great Falls. We didn't even have anything. And then about 6 months into my time there, we built the whole studio, and that's when we started doing all of our shows. And then we got bought by Kohl's, who has brought in SWX and all that about 3-4 years ago. And we've just been kind of ramping up since then.
It's so interesting working in the media world. I graduated journalism school here at University of Montana with a degree in print journalism 2009. And I wrote my senior thesis about the future of sports journalism and the impact that the internet would have on just the way that news is conveyed, especially in the sports world. And I interviewed a bunch of really prestigious journalists, Jay Mariotti and Woody Page and a couple of the other guys from Around the Horn and those types of shows. And basically everybody said, hey, we know that the internet will be a supplement to newspapers, but I don't know if anybody saw what's happened the last 10 years with the way that online has just taken over everything, Twitter, multimedia, all that kind of stuff. And once upon a time, I thought I'd be working at a newspaper forever, and I quickly learned that just wasn't the reality. The corporate takeover was very real, and just being short-staffed, wanting to live in Montana, it was hard. But now, kind of through our collaboration with ESPN Missoula as well as SWX-TV, we're kind of part of a couple media entities that are actually growing, and that's something that's kind of fun to be a part of. But I think people don't really realize, everybody kind of knows there's your three networks. You got your ABC, your NBC, your CBS, and I guess people, I don't know if they realize kind of the startup feel that ABC Fox has had, and how you, like you say, you didn't even have a studio. Now you guys have this full-fledged studio. You guys anchor shows there. You added this new thing in SWX Tonight. So it's been really cool to watch everything you guys have done over there. But tell people a little bit more about SWX Tonight. I know a lot of people are watching it now, but I'm sure there's plenty of people listening to this show right now that maybe don't know about it that would love to watch it. Because you guys do a nightly sports show every night right after your local newscast. Yeah, well, so SWX is kind of the third channel when it comes to ABC and Fox. So let's say you have ABC and it's your 23.1, and then Fox is 23.2. Well, SWX is 23.3. Unfortunately, SWX isn't on Dish or DirecTV. It's channel 199 on Charter, but we do have a Watch SWX app. But basically, SWX is sports, S, and then WX is sports and weather. And it started in Spokane with KHQ, and they just put a lot of money and emphasis on bringing local sports to the community. And so they, over there, started doing high school, all sorts of different high school events. They're broadcasting Hoop Fest. They broadcasted Bloomsday over the weekend. So they just started doing a whole bunch of live sports and things like that. And then they bought us and have invested a ton in SWX in Montana. So just over the last year, we started doing Class C basketball games. We've done everything from Class AA down to Class C. We've done just baseball, Mavs, Grizz softball. We've been doing Grizz and Cats football and basketball for 4 years or so now, but we've really ramped up our high school stuff. We have some more exciting news coming in the next few days as far as more coverage that we're doing on SWX. But SWX Tonight is something that we're really proud of. It's something that started over in KHQ again, but it's a full half-hour show from 10:30 to 11, and we bounce around the entire state. There's 10 of us, 10 sports reporters, sports anchors in our SWX family between us, Great Falls, Helena, Billings, and Bozeman, and there's 10 of us, and we all are running around getting all the content for the day, and we all compile it into a full half-hour show that we do Monday through Friday. And it's just really cool because it's full half hour. Like our newscast, in my newscast, I get like 3.5 minutes to go over any of the stories, and you can't really, dive deep into anything like that. And a lot of the other sports guys in town that I run into, they get really jealous because they're like, oh, it was so cool that you were able to put that story together and it was 8-9 minutes long. And you have that platform. And so we're able to do whatever we want on that show. And so it's been pretty cool to bring that to everybody. And I know, especially when we go to a lot of like the small communities, they're really appreciative of it because it allows us time to, give them the publicity that they deserve. Because a lot of times I'm broadcasting from Kalispell down to Hamilton, Butte, and Bozeman. Our show is regional, just my newscast on ABC and Fox. Right. And so I can't get like super in depth with things because I have to think, well, what are the majority of the viewers that are watching interested in? And so somebody in Bozeman's probably not interested in Florence softball, for instance. But with this statewide show, we can get more in depth with all of that because, a lot of the people that are watching are interested as far as what's going on throughout the entire state. And a lot of people in Billings are like, oh, it's cool because we never get to see any of the Western teams. And the same, flip-flop for the East, like, oh, we get to see, Gabe Sulcer when he was at Billings. Oh, we get to see a bunch of Gabe Sulcer highlights all the time. So it's just, it's fun. It's a lot of fun. SWX Tonight is an awesome addition. So make it part of your habits. Gus Tutel and I both been on there a couple of times. I got to say, the the TV guys, they have a distinct challenge in trying to be so concise. We would already, the whole show would already be over right now. We're only just sitting here right now getting into the thing. But SWX Tonight's a great product, and ABC Fox Montana, you guys are doing a great job over there as well. But the live sports angle of this thing, too, is so cool. You know, I being someone that grew up in Montana and loves Montana, I watch the first channel I turn it to, SWX, every time I turn on the TV, because not only do you guys do all these live games, but a lot of times then you replay some of the games, too. And, you know, I don't necessarily, if Butte Central's playing Anaconda, I probably already know what the result is, but I still like to see, it's the quality of the broadcast, but also some of the kids. Yeah, I love those rivalry games. Ryan and I called an R-Lee game earlier this year. Yep. I thought that was incredibly fun, going down there, checking out the R-Lee gym. So it's a great deal. Go any $199 charter. Working on the DirecTV dish thing. Maybe we'll get there soon.
Yeah, but the app works really well. It's watch. Just type in Watch SWX into the App Store, and you could download it, and you could pull it up right now. You could watch any of our SWX shows for the last couple of weeks.
Watch this show if you want.
All of the previously aired games for the last few weeks are on there. You could just click on it. You could scrub through any part of the game that you want, and check it out. The app works really, really well.
That's Tommy, for those of you that were wondering. Every time Tommy comes in here, I get worried, but it sounds like we are still on the radio. Tutel Nuanez 129 ESPN Missoula. We're broadcasting to you live, Kurtz Polaris Studio. Sean Rainey from SWX Montana in studio right now. I want to get a little bit about this sports betting, because Ryan and I talked about this last week. On one hand, it seems like there's a lot of ways to bet, even if you live in Montana already, kind of on national platforms. There's I know a lot of people that have bet, while living in Montana, but it seems like none of that revenue that is then built by gambling on sports gets returned to the state. And I think that's one of the main reasons why people, the citizens of Montana and the elected officials in Montana, really wanted to push this sports betting forward, because it is just a way to supplement the local economy. I read an article, they say it's probably going to bring between $3.7 and $4 million to the state, just in terms of money that can be used for infrastructure, roads, education, things like that. So I think on that part, it's a good thing, and I think probably getting some regulations for in-state stuff is a good thing as well. But also seems like there's some tenuous things attached to gambling, maybe some dark stuff attached to gambling. So just broadly, what are your thoughts on sports gambling getting added to becoming legal in Montana?
Well, it's kind of funny because a lot of my family lives in Vegas, and so my uncle is a huge gambler. And he's been doing it for a long, long time. And so him and I are pretty close, and we always talk about sports. And so he's kind of like taught me the ropes on gambling. And so he kind of like, when I was younger, would go over it. And so I've followed it for a long, long time. And it is interesting. It's a mixed bag, because yes, it'll be regulated and bring in money, but two, it's still like, playing blackjack. Like, there's a reason why it's set up, and usually you're not going to win. You have a little bit, better odds, I would say, than playing, the tables or whatever. And as long as you do your research and are more disciplined, you can certainly make money doing it. But it is a little, it does make you worry for, the person that really can't control themselves and are not very disciplined. And you could, it's going to ruin some households, which is kind of the inevitability of it and the scary part of it. I don't think, though, it's going to bring as much of the dark places as you might think, just because gambling's here. Oh, now it's going to be, when it comes to cats and grizz, there's going to be some sketchy things going on. I think when it's out in the open and it's regulated, and if you listen to a lot of the national sports betting people, they say it'll clean up a lot of that stuff actually once it does get regulated. But it's certainly exciting for a lot of the people that want to. I'm not sure, Coulter, do you know, when you were doing the research, if like all like the daily fantasy, I think all of that now will be legal, because I know like you can't do like FanDuel,
right,
and all that kind of stuff now in Montana, but I think that might now be legal.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see, because the next step then is going to see. So what has been legalized is two bills were put in front of Governor Bullock, and one was legalizing sports gambling through the regulating body of the Montana Lottery. which means that you can bet in two different ways. With the Montana Lottery app, which is yet to be developed, but I'm sure is coming, and on the Montana Lottery machines. A lot of bars and casinos in Montana have where you can go buy the lottery ticket. So that stuff, I think, is going to be a little bit haphazard and maybe not that efficient because there's only so many options you can have on one of those machines. So if you're trying to build a fantasy team, for example, like they're only going to have 20 quarterbacks for you to pick from because it doesn't really have real-time ability to update. So I don't think you can go, pick a Tavarius Jackson or something as a quarterback because they're not. It's just going to have the Aaron Rodgers and Drew Brees and Tom Brady. So it's going to be a little bit less sophisticated than a FanDuel. Do they implement a similar game to FanDuel style fantasy when it comes to the betting apps? I'm not sure. And how much of that betting app is going to have prop bets and stuff like that involved into it? I'm not sure about that either. But the other bill was to basically have privatized entities being able to do this. Maybe have private people be bookies, run sports fantasy leagues and stuff like that. That part was shut down, which I think that's a little bit understandable just because you get into some weird stuff. But I do agree. I think that regulating this stuff to a certain degree, it benefits the state financially, and I also think it does undercut a lot of maybe the underbelly of it because I think that it's something that's likely already happening. I just want to get your thoughts on this. MontanaSports.com had a Sunday conversation with Kent Haslam, which they do every week. So Slim Kimmel had an interview with Montana Athletic Director Kent Haslam, and they talked about mostly stuff about the University of Montana Athletic Department. But Slim did ask Kent one question about sports gambling, and Kent talked about a couple things that I hadn't really thought about just in terms of some of the worries with college sports in Montana. Because obviously with no pro sports here, the games that people are going to be most intent on watching and viewing and going to are going to likely be Cats and Grizz games and maybe some Frontier Conference games as well. I highly doubt that Vegas is going to be start putting lines on Frontier Conference games.
No,
but you never know. I mean,
that won't happen.
Yeah, not now for sure. But I won't be surprised if there's lines on Cats and Grizz games, Big Sky Conference games, especially men's basketball and football for sure. But then there's always the worry when you get into prop bets and stuff like that. I mean, we've seen it throughout the history of the NCAA. It's been a lot less prevalent recently, but you wonder if that switches now with so many of these states legalizing gambling. But we've seen point-shaving scandals in college basketball before. We've seen athletes taking money from bookies and cooking results. And, yeah, I don't think this day and age with the level of exposure that we have everywhere that necessarily people are going to be throwing games. I don't think that's going to be a reality. I don't think that at mid-major or FCS level college football that's really going to be that big of a lure. But I do wonder about prop betting and stuff like that. If there is a prop bet within the scope of a game, this guy's going to score less than 10 points and a half or something like that. If that's a worry, I don't know. I don't expect it to be that seedy just because this is sort of lower level college athletics, but you never know. What are your thoughts on just the fact there is no pro sports teams here, so a lot of this stuff's going to be centered upon Montana State? Well,
I don't think that they'll have those detailed of prop bets at this level.
Right.
Usually, it's they will have on some of the other national sites and stuff, like you can do live betting in a game. Like if the Grizz are down 10 at halftime, you can bet on them to come back and win or whatever. But as far as like individual players and all that kind of stuff goes, I don't think that they'll even have that. I think it'll just be, your kind of basic over under and first half, second half stuff.
I'm going to be so interested to see where they're getting the gambling data, the lines and stuff like that. Because if Montana starts to make their own lines, like if the Montana Lottery is running this like a Vegas casino would, a Vegas sports book would, then it could get more detailed, but I don't necessarily know if there's going to be the audience for that. Whereas if these lines are just coming from Vegas, you're totally right. I mean, right now, Montana State is so far down the totem pole in terms of the betting lines. Like, you can find lines on Cats and Grizz games, but you're like you're saying, you're getting over and under, you're getting first half over and unders. That's it. You're not getting the prop bet.
Yeah, when it becomes legal, I think people are just going to want to go down to the casino to put $10 on the Patriots or whatever.
Sure.
I don't think it's going to be. There's not going to be a lot of action on Cats and Grizz games. It's mostly just going to be, you could bet on your NFL team on Sundays and some NBA and things like that.
Interesting. Well, it'll be interesting to see how it all plays out as we get more details on sports gambling in Montana and some of the regulations and specifics and all that. We'll keep you up to date. But I think by and large, generally, I think it's a good thing.
It'll be interesting because I wanted to, I was talking to my news director, because Scott Van Pelt has his, Bad Beats segment.
Right.
And it's one of the most popular, but he has a lot of criticism because it kind of promotes gambling, and a lot of people say that's a bad thing. And so I was like, well, if it becomes legal, like, do I get to have my own gambling segment / like, is that okay or is it not okay? Like, what do I do? But I'd love to do a little gambling segment. That'd be fun.
It's so interesting to see how it's evolved into becoming more socially acceptable even before it was actually legal, right? Like, Bill Simmons has his podcast with Cousin Sal, who used to be a producer on the Jimmy Kimmel Show, Guess the Lines. They've been doing that forever. Yeah. And they used to always tongue-in-cheek joke, like, if we were to sports gamble, sports gambling is bad, don't sports gamble. But if we were, these would be the lines that we would guess. And now it's just full-fledged like, yeah, last weekend I put $1,000 on the Patriots -7 and I won. Yeah, like they're just unabashed about it. So it has been interesting to see the way that it's evolved. Tutel Nuanez, 102.9 ESPN Missoula. Right after the break, we're going to talk a little bit about the Kentucky Derby. Sean and I are both kind of on the same page in terms of where we think this fits into the sports world, but a very controversial Kentucky Derby for sure. Hey, if you're looking for a place to stay in Missoula, check out the Wingate by Wyndham. It's a hotel that really takes care of their business guests. They offer great year-round rates for corporate travelers with the bonus of extra Wyndham Rewards points, and they upgrade regular business guests for no charge whenever possible. But even though they offer great value and cool perks, the regular guests will tell you it's the service that keeps them coming back. Give Kim or Alicia a call and find out what they can do to help you with your business travel needs, or if you're local and you need to have a business meeting, check them out as well. The Wingate by Wyndham in Missoula. Let them make you feel at home even when you're not. Kentucky Derby on the other side.
Canyon River Golf Club is a must for any golfer in western Montana. Tucked away in a spectacular setting along the Clark Fork River in East Missoula, Canyon River offers one of Montana's best championship golf experiences. And Canyon River is happy to announce their new fleet of golf carts, which include the Shark Experience, an interactive GPS giving dynamic distances and touchscreen interaction to help you play your best. Plus, with Bluetooth, radio, and surround sound, you can enjoy yourself between holes too. Book online at CanyonRiverGolfClub.com. Missoula's best golf, Canyon River.
Les Schwab is proud to introduce two of our best tires ever, just in time for summer. There's our exclusive Reputation, a high-mileage premium passenger tire we believe has the quietest, most comfortable ride ever. Or our exceptionally quiet and smooth all-season traction tire, the Open Range AT. Get $50 off alignment when you purchase a set of 4 Open Range AT or Reputation tires. Book an appointment today at leschwab.com. Les Schwab Tires. Doing the right thing matters. Cannot be combined with other offers. Limited time only. See details at leschwab.com.
On Russell, across from the fairgrounds.
It's May, and here in Montana, there is plenty to celebrate. Graduations, Mother's Day, Memorial Day, sunshine, and a full summer ahead. For last-minute gifts or just a good stop on a road trip from here to there, be sure to include Florence Coffee Company. We have reloadable gift cards, good travel mugs, and a full menu of delicious drinks. Celebrate May by stopping at any Florence Coffee Company's 19 locations in western Montana or go to florencecoffeeco.com.
Hey folks, Ryan Tutel here, and I'm with Josh from the Advocates Injury Attorneys. Josh, if our listeners have been injured in an accident, how can you help?
We're here to help you after a car accident by negotiating with insurance companies, recovering lost wages if you have any, and even getting you into a rental car if you need one. Call us today for a free consultation, and we'll get started helping you right away.
If you need help, get a hold of the Advocates. Call Josh at 640-4444 or online at montanaadvocates.com. You deserve an advocate.
ESPN Missoula Sports Center.
Good afternoon. Colter Nuanez is rolling solo, but Sean Rainey, he's here next to me. Militia Breen and Brandon Weber are the Little Sullivan Award winners as Montana's top amateur athletes. The state's AAU chapter announced on Saturday. Breen, a Shoto native, averaged 21.4 points per game during her senior season at Montana State Billings, earning first-team Division II All-American honors and leading the Yellow Jackets to the West Region on the way to the second Elite Eight in school history. Weber, a native of Forsyth, won the NAIA National Wrestling Championship at 157 pounds while competing as a sophomore for Montana State Northern. The other female finalists included Haley Kopinga, a native of Billings who played volleyball at Rocky Mountain College, McKenna Morley of Big Fork, who ran track and field at Colorado, and Sydney Stiles of Bozeman, who plays softball at Iowa State. The other male finalists, Jace McLean of Great Falls, who's a North Dakota State baseball player, Trace Tinkle from Missoula, Montana, who plays at Oregon State, and Tucker Yates, a defensive lineman for the Montana State football team last fall. The Montana softball team, they extended their win streak to 8 games where they come from behind 10-6 win at Southern Utah to finish off a sweep of the Thunderbirds. The victory gives the Grizz the number 3 seed entering the Big Sky Conference tournament, which begins Sacramento State on Wednesday. The Grizz will take on 6th seed in Northern Colorado, 12:30 p.m. And finally, Maximum Security disqualified as the winner of the Kentucky Derby. More on that next. Some fantastic song that DJ Tommy.
See, if I'm going to be on the next 3 days, I'm going to have to give Tommy a list here.
Okay, yeah. We cater to our co-host.
Right.
Don't you worry. We listen to nothing but late 80s hip hop and Rick James soul music when Regime's in here. He gets to pick whatever he wants. Tutel Nuano's broadcasting to you live from the Kurtz Polaris Studios, 102.9 ESPN Missoula. Ryan Tutel, he's out. He's in the Philippines. He's probably sweating harder than I am. Now that it's springtime, this studio gets so hot. You feeling good in here?
I'm good.
Sauna in here. I need to start packing my shorts and wearing my shorts for the afternoon here because it gets hot. We need that central air going. Sean Rainey from ABC Fox Montana as well as SWX Television in studio with me today. If you missed the first segment, talked a lot about just the vision of XWX, the way it's growing. He also talked about some sports betting. Very interesting conversation. And now it's time to get into something that I almost never want to talk about. This is something that my mother grinds on me about all the time. My mother loves horse racing. She loves the Kentucky Derby. My birthday was yesterday, so my birthday's always on Derby weekend or right around it. My mom thinks it's just such a majestic, wonderful sport. She's been trying to get me and my brother to watch it forever, and we're just not into it. But now, yesterday's Kentucky Derby, ripe with controversy. The most controversial I think it's ever been. And it was definitely something that's dominated the headlines in sports news for the last 48 hours. But Maximum Security, the overwhelming favorite in the Kentucky Derby on Saturday, and it was the 145th running of the race. And Maximum Security won the race, or so it appeared. And then something that I've never seen, the first disqualification due to a racer riding and impeding another racer in the history of the Kentucky Derby. Now, I guess it makes sense to me that in horse racing, contact with the other horses might be illegal. But the way this rule was described to me, and correct me if I'm wrong here, is that you can't cut off the horses that are behind you. You can't impede their lane. It seems to me that one of the best strategies you could have as a horse racer, as a jockey, would be to get a length or two in front and then not let the horse run in front of you. It seems like a very common strategy, but for whatever reason, this rule has apparently been in place for over 100 years, but no one has ever brought it up or protested. And yesterday, protests from a couple different jockeys and horse trainers result in the overwhelming favorite who won the race being disqualified, and a different horse, which was a 65-1, I think the second lowest horse ever to win the Kentucky Derby, gets the win. And it's been very controversial because a lot of people think that the only reason this happened is because of replay, and that's one thing that's been a hot topic of debate on this show is just where does replay fit into sports. But this just seems like a rule being exercised for the first time ever just because of the technology we have at our disposal.
Well, and we were talking about sports gambling. Think about how much money was lost/won.
$165.5 million in payouts because of this.
Whew. So Vegas not too happy.
Unbelievable. I mean, I know I have a friend who has a friend who had the horse that won, and this person put $100 on it, won $24,000 on his bet. So, I mean, what do you think of just the implementation of replay into horse racing just in general? I know you're not being a horse racing guy either, so this is a funny subject.
I can't get into it. I don't understand. Like, I get the appeal of, you kind of dress up and have a good time. And, like, I could understand, like, going to it, but I just have never been able to get into horse racing on TV. Like, I just don't get it. And someone's like, oh, no, it's actually really cool. And so I was like, okay, fine. I'll hang out with you. I'll watch the race, and we'll do the whole spiel. And so we had a bunch of people over, and we watched it, and I was like, that's it? Like, I can't get into it. I'm sorry. I just don't. I think it's the whole thing about it is weird to me. It's like all these rich guys that own a horse, and they're kind of abused, but kind of not. And then you got these little tiny riders on them. I don't know. I just can't get into horse racing. I can't do it. I haven't watched a Kentucky Derby in like 8 years.
I understand the pageantry of it. It's kind of the debut event of spring. Kind of ushers in spring. Everybody gets to wear their sundresses and their hats, and everybody gets dressed up, and you drink your special cocktail. That's fun. I've been to Derby parties before. I never actually watched the race when I was at the party. I just hung out with my friends, you know, wear your bright pink suit for the only time you have all year. And, I get that part. I get sort of the nostalgia that's attached to it. I get the money avenue of it. I mean, there's a lot of money attached to this thing, too. But just in terms of this specific Kentucky Derby, for Country House, a 65-1 odds to win this thing, it just seems so strange to me because, in my opinion, the way that I watched this race, the Maximum Security, first of all, won the race, no doubt. Okay, if you're going to enact this rule, I can kind of see it. But to me, there was no way that the horse that won the race, Country House, was going to win the race regardless. Mm-hmm. So I don't really know how this happened. I don't really know where this falls to. What judges are the ones making this decision? It just seems so strange. And I know everybody's up in arms about this thing today, and I haven't ever heard anybody that said, oh, the right decision was made. I've only heard people say, what are we doing here? Why was Maximum Security disqualified? So it feels like the technology has sort of infiltrated this thing, and I just don't really know what the justification is for Country House winning this race.
Yeah, and I don't really have much to contribute on as far as the horse part, but I do have a crazy Kentucky Derby story.
I'm into it. Hit me with it.
Okay, so this one went national, and it was my buddy, and it was this is on Deadspin, so you can look it up, and I'm not lying here. It's a little bit long though. You ready?
Of course, okay. We're in for long stories here. I don't know if you know this, but Ryan Tutel hosts this show.
I know exactly. I was like, I'm not gonna be able to be as long-winded as Ryan through the next 3 days. Okay, so my buddy, one of my best friends, went to school at UM. He's from Minnesota. And went to college with him. Great buddy. His friend they were going to have a bachelor party. And they were going to rent an RV in Minnesota, drive down to the Kentucky Derby, and do this whole weekend spiel with a bunch of guys, right? So they go, there's I think 5 or 6 of them. And they go on Craigslist and rent an RV from this dude. And they go up there, him and his buddy, and the guy's showing him how it runs and everything like that. And the guy took a video of the guy explaining everything on the RV because he's like, we're going to get blackout drunk and not know how to do anything on this RV, gosh, right? Okay. Yeah, so he's taking a video of how it runs and what to do, which is actually pretty smart.
It is, right.
So he's taking the video of how to run the RV and everything. And then the guy goes, here's all your storage. He's like, just don't put anything in that front storage bin. And you can put stuff here and here and here. So they're okay. So they all meet, the rest of their friends all meet at Walmart. And they're all going to park at Walmart, load up in the RV, and head down there. And so they're running out of room, and so they're like, oh, let's just put stuff in that front storage spot. And the guy's like, oh, he said not to use that one because it's broken. They're like, well, we got nowhere else to put it. So they open up the front storage bin, and it just reeked.
You told me the story. I forgot the punchline until right now.
Worst smell that they've ever smelled. And so they're like, what is going on here? So they shine a light, and they see something in the storage unit, deep in there. And so the guy puts his hand in there and he touches something and it freaked him out, and they kind of pull it out a little bit, and there's a dead body in the RV. Human dead body in the RV.
Probably don't want that RV.
So they call the cops, and they're sitting in the Walmart parking lot. The cops come, they interrogate all of them because they're the ones with the RV and a dead body in there. All of their stuff that they were going to take that's in the RV is now evidence, so they don't have any of their clothes or any of their stuff. It's all in the RV and it's all seized, and they're questioned and all this nonsense. Well, the guy shows the cops the video of the guy saying don't put anything in that front spot. And so my friend calls me and he's like, you will have no idea what is going on right now. He called me the day or two after this. And basically then the Kentucky Derby heard about it though. and paid for them to get an RV down to the Kentucky Derby.
Wow.
Gave them a full suite for free.
Wow.
And like, so they got the whole experience all paid for, but it's like the story's on Deadspin, and it later turned out to be, it was actually kind of a sad story. It was just a guy, and he, was high, and it was like really cold, so he like crawled up in there to get warm and died in there. And I don't know what the owner, like, I don't know if he like saw the body in there and then just like left it in there. I don't know what the backstory is on what happened there, but yeah, my best friend called me that, and I didn't believe him at first. And then he sent me the Deadspin article on it, and it was a real thing. So that's his Kentucky Derby story.
Wild.
Yeah.
Barbara Borden, Kentucky's chief steward, she gave this statement after 22 minutes of deliberation after this review and then the ruling. It was actually that was the most gripping moment of the whole thing, was the 22 minutes when they were deciding this whole thing, because you have Maximum Security and his jockey celebrating a win, and then all of a sudden it's under review, so that it was just tense everywhere. And then finally they come down with the ruling, but the statement reads, the riders of number 18, which is Long Range Toddy, and 20, Country House, lodged objections against number 7, Maximum Security, the winner, due to interference turning from home, leaving the quarter pole. We had a lengthy review of the race. We interviewed affected riders. We determined that the number 7 horse drifted out and impacted the progress of number 1, which is War of Will, in turn interfering with 18 and 21, Bot Express. Those horses were all affected, we thought, by the interference. Therefore, we unanimously decided to determine to disqualify Maximum Security and place him behind number 18, which is Long Shoddy, the lowest placed horse that he bothered, which is our typical procedure. So this was definitely an interesting way for this all to go down. Basically, one party gets robbed, another one gets rewarded, and Bill Moth, who's the trainer of County House, said it's bittersweet. You always want to win with a clean trip and have everybody recognize the horse as a very good horse and the great athlete that he is. Due to the disqualifications, I think that was somewhat dismissed. The jockey, Flavien Prat, went on to say, I'm kind of speechless right now. I don't know how to internalize this. At Kentucky House, because it was 65-1 odds, paid $132.40 per dollar bet to win. So that's the second highest payout in Derby history. And he was the horse least affected in the chain of events, but the biggest beneficiary. So pretty interesting. Later on this week, I want to get into replay and sports in general with you, because I want to get your thoughts on this, because it is a hot topic both in Major League Baseball, the NFL, the NBA, across the board. So as a guy who shoots and makes highlights for a living, you're a guy that watches a ton of replay. And so we'll get into that a little bit more. Colter Nuanez, Sean Rainey, broadcasting to you live, 102.9 ESPN Missoula, as well as SWX Television. And you can check out our YouTube channel. Just go to YouTube, type in Tutel Nuanez. We're right there. We need you to hit subscribe. We need to get that subscription count up. But we have had several hundred viewers the last couple weeks here on the YouTube channel as well. So thank you for looking at us and watching us, both on SWX and on YouTube. And thanks for listening as well. University of Montana lacrosse team, they went to the national tournament. They were winning for 3 quarters against the University of Dayton, but they came up just short. Tucker Sargent, head coach, University of Montana lacrosse. Next.
Everybody knows that high school sports generate suspense, excitement, and drama.
They also generate higher grade point averages, stronger work habits, and greater self-esteem.
Everybody knows that high school sports give us more value for our entertainment dollar.
They also give us leaders committed to strengthening communities right here in Montana. The true value of playing sports in school can't be measured in wins and losses or dollars and cents. Studies show that participation in sports, along with other extracurricular activities, is one of the best ways to teach leadership, cooperation, accountability, and other invaluable life skills. Don't just stand on the sidelines. Encourage the young people you know to get in the game. When you do, you'll be helping them get ahead in life. High school sports, a winning part of a complete education. This message presented by the Montana High School Association and the Montana Interscholastic Athletic Administrators Association.
Alpine Touch is legendary around the state of Montana for providing delicious seasonings for every grilling occasion. Now, Alpine Touch offers so much more, from a savory new barbecue sauce to spicy pepper blends to tasty barbecue rubs. In addition to the classic, Alpine Touch has a variety of seasoning salts for whatever you need to spice up. Now that the holidays are over, Alpine Touch makes a perfect thank you gift to show your friends and relatives you love them. Alpine Touch, available at retail retail locations around Montana or online at alpinetouch.com. Alpine Touch, Montana's special spice.
No matter how far you may go, there's always one just down the road. Town Pump, ooh, pump it up, pump it up.
Craving some caffeine? Need a snack? Then stop by your local Town Pump now. We've got buy one, get one free on our 11-ounce high brew coffee and Doritos XXL, 2 for only $6. Stock up today. Town Pump Food Stores, proud to be part of our community.
Town Pump, right down the road, pump it up, oh yeah.
Hey folks, the best season of the year is upon us. That's right, it's tax return season, and there's one place to have the most fun and make that refund check stretch further than anywhere else, Selway Armory. Selway Armory has the largest selection of firearms, ammo, and accessories of anywhere around, and they have the expertise to go with it. It's not everywhere that you can shop local and save money, but Selway Armory will meet or beat any box store price, and your money stays in Montana. It's tax return time, so get more bang for your buck at Selway Armory. Visit online at selwayarmory.com.
This is Mike Nugent with Berkshire Hathaway Home Services. Berkshire Hathaway provides Western Montana with full-time real estate professionals for you whenever you need us. Our reputation as the state's most knowledgeable and available real estate group has helped build unmatched trust in the Garden City and statewide. If you have been thinking of making a real estate move in the short or long term, give me a call. No pressure, no expectations. Just professional opinions and service at whatever pace you are comfortable with. Give me, Mike Nugent, a call today, 531-1802. And remember, every question is good to ask.
Tutel and Nuanez on 102.9 ESPN Radio for Missoula. Now from the Chris Polaris studio, here is Ryan Tutel and Colter Nuanez.
Tricked you. Just Colter Nuanez, no Ryan Tutel. Tutel's out for the next 2 weeks, enjoying himself a much-deserved elongated vacation in the Philippines. And it was so funny how stressed out he was to go on this thing, because it's not the travel. Ryan's a world-class traveler because he's the most low-maintenance person in the world. He brought one satchel, 2 pairs of shorts, 2 pairs of underwear, 2 shirts. That's it. 2
Really?
weeks. Oh, yeah.
That doesn't surprise me.
Pair of sandals. Yeah.
Dude, the travel plan stressed me out when he was saying what he had to do.
The actual traveling wasn't the thing that was stressing him out. It was his survival in the 100-degree heat with 95% humidity. He might come back and weigh like 110 pounds. He might just sweat it all off. Maybe
Might be
we all,
good for him.
Yeah, maybe we all need to do it. Just go on a little detox diet. It is Tutel Nuanez, minus the Tutel, just Nuanez, and Mr. Sean Rainey from SWX Montana, as well as ABC Fox Montana.
We've got Tucker.
And now, a guy that I'm going to get in here when he gets back into town, into the studio, during this hiatus that Tutel has while he's in the Philippines. But our good friend of the show, former co-host of the show, and the head coach of the University of Montana lacrosse team, Tucker Sargent. Tuck, thanks so much for calling in, man. I know it was kind of a tough morning for you, but it was really fun watching you guys. You fought hard. You're playing in the first round of the MCLA tournament, national tournament. You guys are the number 13 seed, taking on the Dayton Flyers. You're winning at halftime. You're winning at the end of the third quarter, and then all of a sudden a little bit of a barrage by the Flyers, and they were able to close that thing out, 10-7 win. But a hard-fought game by your boys and the University of Montana lacrosse team. So just general thoughts after the national tournament experience for you guys?
Well, gentlemen, I just want to say, first of all, thanks for having me on the show. And, it was great. I mean, I think that our boys gave it everything that they had. I mean, the weather down here actually just turned for the worst. They postponed the afternoon games, but it was about 75 and sunny and absolutely gorgeous, and I think that those conditions ultimately kind of played a role in our demise, seeing as that was about the warmest game we've played all year by about 30 degrees. And, you know, our guys were in shape. We came into it knowing that our roster, or our available numbers, were going to be low. We had about 19 guys dressed available to play, and you know, they gave it everything they had, and I think that, you know, the University of Dayton and a lot of the other teams there were actually pretty stunned. I don't think anyone expected us to do much as a 13 seed taking on the 4 seed, except we had some confidence in what we were planning on doing, and I think we executed that game plan for the most part. We really limited their offense. We controlled the ball well. Our face-off guy had number 24, Luke Johnson. One of the laws that draws X, so we were able to maintain possession and slow down the pretty good Dayton offense and really control the tempo of the game. But I think what you ultimately saw was that, it's a fast-paced, up-and-down, grueling game, and they were a little bit deeper, and we had to make some adjustments. Our first-team all-conference defensive midi, Nolan Davis, ended up rolling his ankle so bad that he was been in an air cast since last week's practice, and we weren't able to get him going, so we had to. Not only did we lose our best short stick defender, but then we had to pull down one of our leading scorer, Aiden Larson, and have him step up in more of a midfield role because he's actually quite a good defender as well. So it sort of was a double whammy with losing a defender and then an offensive player. They kind of slowed our offense down, but, the guys gutted it out, and they gave it everything. And, at the end of that, I think what you just saw was, the war of attrition, and our guys had nothing left. They put it all out there, and Dayton had, they were running 4 lines to our 2, and I think that our guys just, there's only so much fuel in the tank, and I couldn't be prouder of the effort they put out there, and I think they made Montana proud and our conference proud just by the effort they gave a team that has a look at, one of the I'd say, teams that people say would pick has a chance of winning the whole thing. So, very proud of our guys, how they fought and what they did out here. You'd like to see that go the other way, but someone's got to move on, and unfortunately it wasn't us, but, we gave it our best shot, and there's I don't think there's any kid that's hanging their head feeling like they left anything on the table for this season.
Tucker Sargent, head coach of the University of Montana lacrosse team. Their season ended today. I guess you got one more game left, but the tournament over now. Number 4, Dayton with a 10-7 win over the 13th-seeded Grizz. But, Tucker, you mentioned just the possession game. Watching the game, it seemed what goes into that in lacrosse, as somebody that's just a novice to the sport, you could definitely tell that Dayton's offense did not find its flow until late third quarter, maybe early fourth quarter. But then once they did, they seemed to be able to keep the ball on their side of the field, and they scored kind of in a flurry. And then you guys were kind of able to close that up late and keep the score close. But there was just that one flurry where they scored 5 or 6 goals in the span of maybe 8 or 10 minutes. What changed? What was the factor that helped Dayton kind of go on that run?
Yeah, well, it is. It's very much a game of runs, and the momentum is a very true thing in lacrosse. And I think when they were able to start get that run is, I think it was because we turned the ball over on a few instances more than you would really hope to see, and part of that comes from, it's just your legs. It's like any sport, man. Once your legs go, it's hard. It's harder for your arms. It's harder to think. Once you start getting kind of gassed that way, and you start, maybe the passes aren't as accurate, and that gives them an extra possession. One thing that we were able to do to slow them down was our attack at the beginning of the game was doing a really good job on the ride, and that's when the other team gets the ball in the defensive end. They're trying to clear it to their offense. So when you're defending a clear, it's called the ride, and our attack were riding very hard. And making it really difficult for them to move the ball upfield and get it into the hands of their playmakers, and they were getting kind of frustrated there. Once they got that there, I think that you just saw there was a couple of lapses here. Some of the goals, they got. It's frustrating because I think that we really executed, even for being as tired and as tough as the game was. We didn't pick up the ball. There were some loose balls that 50-50 who's going to get it, and they got a couple right in front of the net there where, one of the goals, a kid just picked it up and flung it towards the net without even looking at it. That went in. We had another goal where one of our defenders, we actually took the ball away from their offense, and as he was trying to throw it back to our goalie to clear the ball upfield, he just threw a bad pass, and one of their attackmen just had, was right in the, it was just a throwaway, and he grabbed it in front of the net, and it was, an easy gimme goal. So a couple of those things I think, helped lead to it. I don't think there was a sense ever that we were really falling out of it, but it just was enough where once they got a lead, I don't think we had enough in the tank at that point in the game to really put forth the effort to steal it back. So they were able to just kind of ride out, what was a very close and hard-fought game.
Tucker, correct me if I'm wrong as I go through this here, but so lacrosse originally started out, it's a Native American sport, right? Correct?
Yes, correct.
Yeah, but I think stereotype wise when we think of a lacrosse player, at least what comes to my mind is some kind of a clean cut kid from Rhode Island or somewhere on the Northeast, and it's kind of and it's kind of like a kind of like a Richie sport or whatever. But you guys, when Keith the Molder came down and did a story on your team and stuff, and is getting all these shots of all the athletes on your team, I mean, you guys look like a bunch of hockey players almost, kind of gritty, tough, long hair, kind of grinding in the dirt type guys. How much maybe is that a reason why your team maybe is able to beat some of these teams that might have a little bit more talent? It seems like you guys are maybe just a really gritty team that were able to just grind out and win a lot of games this year.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's part of it. It's just sort of the attitude you approach it. There's a lot of ways to win a lacrosse game.
Mm-hmm.
And from the outset, we just looked at our team and said, guys, this is what we had. We started the season with 26, and we were, down to 20, due to injuries throughout the season. But, we're not manufacturing any more players that are going to join the squad halfway through. It's this is what we've got. And if we want to be successful, we've got to be ready to gut out some wins. We've got to be ready to, be in shape. So we ran them really hard, and we did a lot of really brutal things. We were practicing, in Missoula when it was 10 degrees out. Seriously, we were outside doing that sort of thing. So I think that part of attitude, you talk about the look of our team. I don't know how much that, the physical appearance has anything to do with it. I think that's just more of we got some pretty interesting styles that, kids are rocking right now. I mean, our goalie went and got, cornrows for the tournament. So we've got a lot of personalities and characters, but, we just say we've got to be able to win in a lot of different ways. There's not one style of win. We've got talent, but sometimes we're going to have to outmuscle them. I think when you looked at this Dayton team, they were sort of what you were describing there, where you had, more of your kind of clean cut looking, classic, kind of lacrosse athlete as you described it. Well, we felt that we had a bit of a size advantage, and they play kind of a cleaner game. They say, let's muddy this one up a little bit. Let's be more physical with them. And we told even the attack, once their defenders get the ball and they're trying to go the other way, our defense starts with you guys. You're the first line of defense right there. So let's bang them up. At the midfield, we said, if a guy's dodging on you and he gets, first man, let's get an early slide and give him a pop and, see how they respond to that. And I think that the physicality we came with in this game was definitely something that kind of threw them off, where all of a sudden they weren't trying to get to the center, in front of the goal as much. They were working the ball around more. They were kind of looking for those outside shots, typical to a three-pointer in basketball, where the percentage, just a longer distance, the percentage goes down. So we were comfortable kind of keeping them to the outside and settling that, letting our goalie eat that up. And so I think that was just kind of the way we looked at it today was, what do we have that they don't? And what can we take advantage of? So each game's different, but today was definitely let's be a little more physical and see what happens. And, for about 50 or 60 minutes, it was pretty good.
Tucker Sargent, head coach, University of Montana Lacrosse. Their tournament run of the MCLA tournament ends with a 10-7 loss to fourth-seeded Dayton. But, Tuck, you got one more game left, right? Is that right? You get one more match?
They do. So because of the tournament, just it's a national tournament, there's a lot of teams. Fortunately for us, it's only an 8-hour drive, so it's not really a big deal. But, you got Georgia Tech flying in from Atlanta. And, one of the thinkings was a number of years ago is that you come all the way out here. Obviously, it's a one-and-done tournament. But if you lose on the first day, you're already out here. We got the field space. I guess you could call it a consolation game or whatever. It's just it's a friendly at the end of the season. Right. Two teams that play, and I think that's a lot of people think oh, what's the point of it? It's over. And I think it gets back to kind of the roots of really what lacrosse is, right? Lacrosse is, the Native Americans call it the medicine game, and they played it for a number of different reasons, but it was healing, and it's just about the love of the sport and playing. And I think that it's, there's so much, this, and even this tournament, it's about winning and losing, right? You're trying to find an ultimate champion. But at the end of the day, why do you get into sports? You get into them because they're fun. You get into them because you love them, because it's fun to play and get out there. And I think that if you've got two teams in available field space that you might not see, how often are you going to see the University of North Florida? But if Montana gets an opportunity to play them, I don't know if we're playing them or not yet. Who knows? But it's going to be, usually they pair teams that are very far away from each other. And I think it's great. I think it's an excellent experience for the kids, just to remind you that, we do this because we love it. And it creates a lot. It's a great experience. And you get to, see teams from across the country. It's a fun time. You see the players trading jerseys and pennies and stuff after that at the end of the game. And it's kind of a nice wrap-up. And then after that, we'll all head home.
Well, Tucker, I know it was a very interesting season given the early spring weather in Montana. A great year for you guys getting an at-large bid to the national tournament. And I know, despite the loss today, you're proud of the guys. But congratulations on a great season. Thanks so much for being with us, and we'll catch up with you soon, buddy.
Colter, you bet, Sean. Thanks for filling in, man. You guys are doing awesome, and I'll see you when I get back. Cheers.
Tucker Sargent, University of Montana lacrosse. They fall 10-7 to Dayton. They will play one more game, a friendly, before hitting the highway back for one more long bus trip for this season. Hour 1 in the books. Hour 2, wheelhouse time. It's the NBA. Tutel Nuanez, 129 ESPN Missoula.
Canyon River Golf Club is a must for any golfer in western Montana. Tucked away in a spectacular setting along the Clark Fork River in East Missoula, Canyon River offers one of Montana's best championship golf experiences. And Canyon River is happy to announce their new fleet of golf carts, which include the Shark Experience, an interactive GPS giving dynamic distances and touchscreen interaction to help you play your best. Plus, with Bluetooth, radio, and surround sound, you can enjoy yourself between holes too. Book online at CanyonRiverGolfClub.com. Missoula's best golf, Canyon River.
More bedrooms, a big yard, better commute. Whatever your reason to buy a new home, it's the right reason. In a tough housing market, the smartest thing you can do is pre-qualify for a loan before you start looking. Farmers State Bank makes it easier than ever to start the loan process with online checklists, forms, and calculators. Your dream home is out there. Get started today at farmersebank.com. Farmers State Bank, an equal housing lender and member FDIC.
This Mother's Day, treat the Montana mom in your life to the Montana Club's famous Mother's Day buffet. She'll be dazzled as she savors everything from slow-roasted prime rib and glazed ham to fresh berry crepes and lemon bars. If mom wants to sleep in, bring her in later for our artfully crafted Mother's Day dinner specials like brandy peppercorn filet and steak and Maine lobster tail. Mother's Day buffet 8 to 2, followed by Mother's Day dinner specials 3 to close. The Montana Club on Brooks and North Reserve, Missoula.
Hey folks, Ryan Tutel here, and I'm with Josh of the Advocates Injury Attorneys. Josh, what are people left dealing with after an accident?
Well, quite a few things, actually. We see people that are in pain, they still need to get to work, they need to raise their kids, and now they have to take time to go see doctors and other healthcare providers. They're frustrated with working with the insurance companies and getting the runaround. We'll take on the burden of dealing with the insurance companies so you can get the best settlement possible and get back to your life.
Find your advocate online at montanaadvocates.com. There are a lot of lawyers. You deserve an advocate. Hi, boys and girls. Ryan Tutel
and Colter Nuanez
from Tutel and Nuanez on 102.9 ESPN Radio, from your very favorite Tutel and Nuanez podcast, and now officially Gracious Mercy on television statewide.
That's right. We've been doing a radio show and a podcast since August of 2017, and now it's time for us to expand our reach into statewide television on SWX.
We're on SWX every weekday from 4 to 6 live on your televisions. It's available on channel 199 on Spectrum Cable or on 23.3 on your antenna television. And you can download the Watch SWX app and get us that way on your phones and devices as well.
And of course, we'll still be right here, 102.9 ESPN Radio from Missoula and the Bitterroot Valley. And as always, you can find the podcast, the live stream, and everything else you need, 1029ESPN.com.
Colter, do you think that we're spreading ourselves too thin? Are we going to saturate these people and they're just going to start hating us, the inevitable backlash of the great heights to which we have now attained?
No chance. Tutel Nuanez, Montana's only statewide sports talk show.
ESPN Radio for Western Montana, KKVU HD3 Stevensville, and 102.9 FM on K275BS Missoula. ESPN Missoula Sports Center.
Hello, Colter Nuanez, 102.9 ESPN Missoula. Alicia Breen and Brandon Weber are the Little Sullivan Award winners as Montana's top amateur athletes, the state's AAU chapter announced on Saturday. Breen, a Shoto native, averaged 21.4 points per game during her senior season at Montana State Billings. earning first-team Division II All-American honors and leading the Yellow Jackets to the West region on the way to their second Elite Eight appearance in school history. Weber, a native of Forsyth, won the NAIA National Wrestling Championship at 157 pounds while competing for Montana State Northern. The other female finalists included Haley Kopinga from Rocky Mountain College Volleyball, McKenna Morley from Colorado Track. She is a Big Fork native. Sydney Stiles from the Iowa State softball team. She hails from Bozeman. The male finalist, Jace McClain of Great Falls, who plays baseball at North Dakota State. Trace Tinkle from the Garden City of Missoula, who plays basketball at Oregon State. And Tucker Yates, a Colstrip native who just completed his football career at Montana State. The Montana softball team, they extended their winning streak to 8 games with a come-from-behind 10-6 win over Southern Utah to finish off a sweep of the Thunderbirds in Cedar City. The victory gives the Grizz the number 3 seed entering the Big Sky Conference tournament, which begins Wednesday at Sacramento State. The Grizz will take on Northern Colorado, 12:30 p.m. And finally, the Missoula Osprey, they've announced their firework dates for the 2019 season. Tune in to Tutel Nuanez for more.
Live on the stream at 1029ESPN.com. The stream is available thanks to Opportunity Bank, your local bank, your opportunity. Now for the Kurtz Polaris studio, here is Ryan Tutel and Colter Nuanez.
Welcome back. Colter Nuanez, 1029 ESPN Missoula. Ryan Tutel out for the next 2 weeks, but we got plenty of friends, guests, interview subjects, sources, all of the above. And we also got a bunch of free stuff for you, so keep it tuned right here. Today through Wednesday, Sean Rainey from SWX Television and ABC Fox Montana in studio with me. If you missed anything from the first hour, Sean and I talked a little bit about SWX and the way that the station has evolved, in part to include this show, SWX Montana, every single day, 4 to 6 p.m., but also all the live sports they're doing. We also talked about some sports gambling, and, of course, the controversy surrounding the Kentucky Derby. And we were joined by Tucker Sargent, University of Montana men's lacrosse. They fell to number 4 Dayton in the first round of the MCLA tournament, 10-7. The Grizz have one more friendly remaining, but their tournament run is over in the national tournament. If you missed anything from the first hour, podcast is available on our website, 1029ESPN.com. You can also find it in the TuneIn Radio app or on iTunes. Just click on right there on the podcast. The podcast is available to you thanks to the Wingate by Wyndham Hotel. Also, as you heard Mr. Cutler just say there, you can find the live stream there. Listen to ESPN Radio 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Just click on the Listen Live tab on 1029 ESPN. That live stream brought to you by Opportunity Bank. Opportunity Bank, your local bank, your opportunity. If you want to get involved, you want to give us a call, give us a shout, 329-1899. We're going to be talking a lot of NBA here the next half an hour. I got a bunch of stuff I want to ask the Rain Man here about the NBA. And also keep that phone close to you, 329-1899, because somewhere in this segment, we're going to be giving away a gift card to Tagliari Deli. It's the Big Sky Conference Outdoor Track and Field Championships, Wednesday through Saturday. Dorn Blazer Field, first time the championships have been in Missoula since 2008. And if you need a place to get a quick bite while you're down there checking out the action, or you need an excuse to check out the action, go down to Tagliari Deli. They got delicious deli sandwiches, a whole bunch of meats and cheeses on display, a bunch of great wines as well in their wine selection. So give them a check out there, the corner of Beckwith and Higgins. Tagliari Deli bringing you a lot of our coverage from the University of Montana, as well as the Big Sky Conference Outdoor Track and Field Championships just up the road at Dorn Blazer Field. It's NBA time, one of my favorite times. I love this time of year. I love talking about the NBA. And, Sean, here we are. It's the conference semifinals on both sides, and some pretty good series going on right now. And we got some of the juggernauts in the league, like the Warriors and the Rockets. Some really fun upstarts. I love this Blazers-Nuggets series because I think that this is a series that there's a whole bunch of guys that maybe the common fan doesn't know about. But if you like basketball and you like underdog stories, a lot of great stories there. Obviously, the Bucks coming out of nowhere and being the number one best record in the NBA is a great story as well. But they're facing perhaps actually the most talented team in the East in the Celtics. And then, you know, the Raptors series has been so back and forth as well. And Kawhi Leonard has emerged and reaffirmed himself, I think, as one of the best players in the NBA. So just overall, what have you thought of the playoffs so far?
They've been awesome. I think for me, at the beginning, the biggest takeaway was the Clippers actually winning a couple games against the Warriors and kind of proving that it's not just they're going to run through everybody and win. Like, they showed that there's a legit chance that somebody could beat the Warriors. And so that kind of really intrigued me early on, because I think the one thing that we love about sports is because we don't know the outcome.
And I think that's why people have gotten tired of the Warriors.
Yes,
thing,
and
right?
that's why I can't stand the Warriors, because it's like, all right, well, none of this matters because they're going to win in the end anyway.
Right.
So, like, it takes away all of the intrigue for me. But I think the Clippers shown, especially because they weren't very talented, and they were able to win a couple games at Golden State, too.
Sure.
That, like, all right, maybe another team has got a chance, you know? And so I think that really early on is what got me interested. Obviously, the Damian Lillard shot to knock the Thunder out was one of the
greatest
shots moments ever. We had just gotten done with our SWX Tonight show, and we're all in the newsroom watching it. There's like 5 of us, and we just lost it. It was so cool. That was such an awesome moment. But yeah, it's just so fascinating to me, especially in the East, because I think right when LeBron left, we're like,
Wide open.
it's but everyone was like, well, it's Boston and Philly.
Right.
And those are the two teams. It's going to come down to them, hands down. And they've had just so much drama within their teams this year. You know, Boston has been all over the place. Sometimes they look at parts in the season that they look terrible. And then they show flashes of greatness because they are so talented. And then Philly, to me, you know, they bring in Jimmy Butler, who's just been kind of a cancer everywhere he's been going. And Joel Embiid's always dramatic. And that's what's the best part about the NBA.
The drama.
Is the drama. Like, basketball-wise, if you're a basketball fan, like, college basketball is way better. The game is better. The product is better. Like, I just enjoy watching college basketball in and of itself.
Why
if we're
is
talking
that?
basketball.
Is it just because of the structure?
It's the structure, like the effort defensively. Every bucket kind of means more. And just the way that they're playing, I just enjoy watching college basketball better. There's less, you know, flopping and complaining to the referees, and it's just not all that extra stuff around it. But the NBA, that's what makes the NBA so great, is all the egos and how sensitive NBA players are.
Oh.
It is insane. It is so crazy how sensitive they are.
That's why I think Lillard has risen into this conversation as for sure a top 10 guy, maybe even a top 5 guy, because he's the least drama queen out of all these guys. All the rest of these guys, they're losing their minds.
Well, and I love the quote that Lillard had. Somebody asked him about pressure. He's like, this isn't pressure. Like, I get to play a game. He's like, pressure is like a single mom trying to provide for her family. And like, he really put it into perspective, because one of the worst quotes, because we hear a lot of the same quotes over and over and over again in this business. The one that I cannot stand is when professional players go, I'm just trying to put food on the table. It's like, dude, you make millions of dollars.
Millions of dollars.
You cannot say the phrase trying to put food on the table.
Right.
Like, get out of here.
Yeah,
I can't stand that. So Lillard like really put it into perspective. And I think him and the Blazers have gotten a lot of new fans out of this. Like, I know, like, you know, Vince Bagby, our SWX Tonight producer, we're like sitting there and he's like, you know, I don't really have an NBA team. He's like, but if I had to pick one, let's go with the Blazers. Like, we're in the Northwest. They're like one of the closer teams. Lillard played in the Big Sky, and they're just likable. They're a likable team, and Lillard is a likable star. And so it's been cool, you know, watching him and watching the Blazers shorthanded kind of make this run. So
Austin Tutel and I, Ryan's younger brother, is one of my good friends. We were talking about that too, because him and I both grew up diehard Laker fans, because we were both big-time Shaq and Kobe fans. You know, we were right at that age when, you know, we were 10, 12 years old when those guys were running the NBA. And since then, the NBA has become so ripe with free agency, and the player movement is so crazy, and all the max contracts and the super teams and the alliances of superstars and all this stuff. So I've just really gravitated towards rooting for players and rooting for narratives. And I always, you know, deep down, I always root for LeBron. Not necessarily because he's my absolute favorite, but just because me and you are kind of on the same page. Yeah. The guy is one of the greatest players of all time. Anybody that thinks otherwise, you're just wrong. And I just want him to have the resume so it's just undeniable, so that all the haters can just shut their mouths. I think it's crazy that people hate on this guy, even though he's been as steady and consistent and unbreakable as you can possibly become. But that's my next question for you is, right now the national narrative, if you look at the TV ratings and stuff, the ratings on these games are way down. And there's a lot of people talking about, well, LeBron's not in the playoffs. Russell Westbrook's not in the playoffs. There's some of these really marquee guys, and then you got teams like the Lakers and the Bulls and the Knicks, the three biggest market teams in the league, sitting at home. The Clippers were, a long shot at the beginning, and they only got 6 playoff games. So you got most of the big league teams. The Nets were out early. So all the big market teams kind of out too. I guess Houston's kind of considered a big market team now. Golden State's a national brand, so they're obviously, the market doesn't matter. But to me, and this is as a guy who loves LeBron and wants LeBron to go to the finals every year and loves watching LeBron's trek to the finals every year, but I actually find it kind of refreshing that LeBron's not in the playoffs, because now it's given a lot of shine, and we're kind of getting to see Giannis on a national stage. We're getting to see the emergence of a guy like Nikola Jokic. We're getting to see the emergence of Damian Lillard. We're getting to see, the reemergence of Kawhi Leonard. So I think that LeBron not being in the playoffs and not having this giant shadow over the playoffs is actually kind of refreshing, even though I would love if he was in it. But I got to tell you, the way that the NBA TV schedule works, the fact that they determine every national game before the season starts, and then you have to watch like a 35-win Lakers team 3 times a week down the stretch, it drives me nuts. I can't stand it. It's like, why can't we have some flex games here? Show me the Bucks. Why are we not watching the best team in the NBA instead of the Lakers? But regardless, I think it's kind of refreshing that LeBron's not in the playoffs, even though I would love it if he was in the playoffs as well.
Yeah, I kind of agree. I mean, I think it would be a lot more intriguing if he was in it still. But I think the big markets out is a reason. And I just think that there's just, a Warriors fatigue as well. I think a lot of people just aren't tuning in. I know a lot of people, too, that when I talk to them about the NBA, like, they don't watch it until like later on in the playoffs, because like the NBA playoffs are so long. Like there's no reason why we need 7 games to determine first round. Like make it 5, go back to 5 at least. Like
what if they went to just having 4 teams from each conference make the playoffs? Cut the playoff field in half.
Well, maybe not. Yeah.
Like what if they started right now? What if it started right now?
Yeah, I mean, I'd be fine with it. I think 6 would be good. 6 on each side, and maybe just give me the top 12. Not even sure. It doesn't. East and West doesn't matter.
Right.
But like, come on. We know that like the Pistons. Like, come on.
What are we doing?
The Pistons are not
60-win Bucks versus the 40-win Pistons.
We're just waiting. Yeah, we're just like delaying the inevitable here. But now, like, once we get to this round, like this round has been awesome. Yeah, I mean, like, we get the 4 overtimes. Like that series is awesome. Houston could tie it up. Like that series has been could be really good. And then, I mean, the Toronto-Philly series, who knows where that one's good. I think Toronto pulls it off. Maybe I don't know. But like all these series have been great this round.
I got a couple questions for you. First of all, going back to the Clippers. To me, it seems that the Clippers are the best built team to add a superstar and not have to change anything about their team. Like
depending on who the superstar is.
Depending on who the superstar is, right. But you have multiple guys who could play basically the same roles that they do play right now, playing for the Clippers. But like Patrick Beverley's role would largely be the same if they got a superstar. So would Lou Williams. He'd still be a great bench player. Danilo Gallinari was their leading scorer this year. He's totally fine being a number 2 or number 3 scorer because he's kind of just a pick and pop guy. He doesn't really create that much for himself. He's just a good shooter. Montrezl Harrell, guys like that. They have a bunch of energy guys. I feel like that a superstar could walk into there. And to me, then everybody was talking about the Patrick Beverley, Lou Williams press conference afterwards after Durant dropped 50. And they're like, well, what'd you think? We weren't trying. I mean, we're obviously trying. It's just like when Kevin Durant gets hot, you can't stop him. But to me, I thought that was really cool that they were so candid. It was funny. It was entertaining. But I also thought there was a little bit of sales pitch in there, too. I thought those guys were maybe saying, hey, KD, we respect you. We love you.
I think Kawhi would be the better fit there.
See, that's an interesting one, too.
And he wants to go to L.A.
Right.
See, here's the thing with the NBA. You can get those teams like the Clippers that don't have like the superstar, but they're all playing within their role and they're gritty, and so they go about as far as they can, like what the Clippers did. But then you could add like too many stars and it doesn't work. Like, totally. I think that's why Boston was so good last year, was because they had everybody in their role. They didn't have to worry about like sharing shots and the egos of getting Gordon Hayward and Jason Tatum and Kyrie Irving, like they had what they had, and so it all just like flowed and worked, and everybody like was happy with their role. And then you add a healthy Kyrie, a healthy Gordon Hayward. Like Jason Tatum hasn't looked very good this year. What he looked like, he was like
budding superstar,
on the precipice of being one of the top 20 players in the NBA,
no doubt,
last year. And so the NBA is so weird when it comes to like sharing the wealth of stuff and and the chemistry. And I just don't. I think the Clippers, like, it has to be, a team like that has to be very careful with how they add stars. But that's why I do give Golden State a lot of credit, is because of how they are able to work together. But it's because a lot of like their skill set, like you get a Klay Thompson, like all of them can, like Klay and Steph, like all of them can score without having to dribble a lot.
Exactly.
Which is why it works.
Yep.
Like the reason why I'm not huge on like a Kyrie Irving, like I don't think he's talented, but I don't think he's good as far as like winning, is because he has to have the ball in his hands so much. And that's why like I think the Celtics have had this weird dynamic going on, is because he's just a one-on-one type player. And so that's why I do give a lot of credit to Golden State, but that's why I think that like Philly, like even Philly, like all they did was add talent. They added Jimmy Butler, they added
Tobias
Harris, and they've kind of like struggled a little bit more because now you just have to split those shots. Like I feel like they're better if they don't if they didn't have Jimmy Butler or Tobias Harris, then you're just getting more like JJ Redick coming off of screens, and then Embiid getting more looks in the post, and then Jimmy can like take over, and you're not having to like, all right, well, I got to get this guy a couple shots and this guy a couple shots. I don't know. I just feel like the NBA is it's a very fine line with the chemistry as far as that goes. And I think we're seeing it with Boston and Philly, and why they're not as good in a team like the Bucks, where Giannis can kind of do his thing, and then you surround him with shooters, and then you are able to be successful because everybody has their role and they know what their role is, and they know I'm getting my 8 3-pointers in this game, like my 8 shot attempts. Bledsoe knows he's going to get a handful of attempts to drive and things like that. With the Celtics, like, they just don't know. Like Jason Tatum, like, could get 20 shots, could get 10 shots. Gordon Hayward, like, how many shots is he going to get? Like, you just don't know. And I think that's why we see them and like Philly being so up and down.
This is the point I've always tried to hammer home to Tutel. Tutel Nuaz won tonight, ESPN Missoula. And I 100% agree with you. More good players is not necessarily better in the NBA. Mm-hmm. The Sixers, Ilyasova and Bellinelli are not as good as Tobias Harris or Jimmy Butler, but the Sixers are better with those guys
were better,
than with these guys, because those guys can just stand in the corner. And if they just stand in the corner, they're not irrelevant, because all they got to do is wait to catch the ball. And then when they catch the ball, they can make the shot. That's all. But it's just like everybody wondered, why didn't the Miami Heat just win like 7 championships in a row? It's because when Dwayne Wade doesn't have the ball in his hands, he's not the best version of Dwayne Wade. And when you have LeBron, you're going to have LeBron James with the ball in his hands. Mm-hmm. It's very similar with what you're talking about with the Celtics. The reason, that's another testament to the brilliance of LeBron, because down the stretch with the Cavs, LeBron was basically playing point forward. He'd get the rebound, he'd ignite the secondary fast break, all the offense is running through him, and then he could back it out, and then they could run an ISO play for Kyrie. So you get the best of both worlds. LeBron can push the ball, he can create, he can get out in transition. If it's not there, you got half-court scoring with Kyrie Irving as well. Now, when Kyrie Irving has to be your primary ball handler, you're right. He's got the filthiest handle in the league. He's one of the silliest finishers I've ever seen in my life. But he also is a score-first point guard, and now you got Jaylen Brown and Gordon Hayward and Jason Tatum just standing around. And what good is that? Mm-hmm. And it's why Al Horford's actually the best one of those guys with Kyrie, because he can run the pick and pop, even though Al Horford's by no means as close to as talented as those other guys.
And it's what makes like the Lakers like, what were you doing when they constructed their roster this year?
What were you doing? That's what
it's
I'm
like.
talking
That's what
about.
I'm saying. It's like you have LeBron with the ball, but then you have like Lonzo who needs the ball in his hands, and then you surround him with like no shooters.
No shooters. A bunch
and
of
you
dudes.
bring in a bunch of weirdos. Like it was just like the dumbest roster construction I've ever seen in my life. And it's unfortunate because it's wasting the last like good years of LeBron.
Right. And they just have to make some moves. Right. No, it's totally true. And I think that one of the most underrated parts of the Chicago Bulls dynasty was the absolute defined hierarchy on the Chicago Bulls team. Scottie Pippen likely thought he was the second best player on planet Earth, but he also was 100% aware that who number one was. Nobody thought they were better than Michael Jordan, including Scottie Pippen. And nobody other than those two guys thought they were better than those two guys. Dennis Rodman was totally fine with being the number 3 guy. They have all these role players that were totally fine with their roles. And you look at just throughout the history of the NBA, those are the best teams, because when you have a bunch of dudes who are all trying to get number 1 scorers, and that's why Jimmy Butler's struggling, right? Because Jimmy Butler got to be the leading scorer in Chicago, the leading scorer in Minnesota, and now some nights he's the straight up 5th option. And when he's the 5th option, what do you want a 3-and-D guy who gets most of his half-court opportunities out of ISO plays? What good is that, right? So we talked about this last week. I think that the Sixers, unless they win the NBA championship, they're at a crossroads. They got to decide. They got to figure out who they're going to keep. And it's obviously going to start with Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid. I think you got to choose one of the two, because I think the other one's a good enough asset that you got to go and get somebody else. And I do think you could go get a formidable superstar that would fit the other one better. Like Kawhi Leonard would be better with Ben Simmons than Joel Embiid is. Or a variety of guys would be better with Joel Embiid than Ben Simmons is. Because, I mean, if you're going to go play through Embiid, which I think they should keep Embiid. I think Embiid's the guy you build around. But if you do, you're going to have to give him a post touch all the time. So what do you want around him? You want a pass-first point guard than a bunch of shooters, right? And if you have a guy like Ben Simmons who quite literally hasn't even thought about
his average shot distance was 3.8 feet.
He's never shot a 3 in the NBA.
Yeah.
He's never shot a 3 in the NBA, and that's incredible. That is insane. Brook Lopez shoots threes. Ben Simmons has never shot a 3 in an NBA game. That's crazy. So I just think you got to make a decision there. But I think if they do, they have assets to go rebuild their team around one of those two guys and be really good. And I think that's why you look at the West. First of all, your point about Golden State is great. I think the key is that they have 3 guys that can thrive with and without the ball in their hands. The fact that they have one of the 3 best point guards in the league in Steph Curry, who can play off the ball. He plays off the ball half the time. Mm-hmm. That is such a huge advantage. That's why they have so much flow. But I think that's why that other series is so entertaining, because the hierarchy of both the Nuggets and the Blazers is so defined. Everybody knows who the Blazers' go-to guy is. Everybody on the Blazers, no one's trying to be better than Damian Lillard. They're just trying to be the best number 2 or number 3 or whoever they can be, just like with the Nuggets. Everybody knows it's Jokic and then on down the line. And I feel like it just makes for so much more of an appealing style of basketball. Like when you watch the Bucks, you know exactly who they got. You know exactly who their superstar is. Sometimes the Celtics look so good, and sometimes they look so bad. It's the same with the Sixers. Like when the Sixers put together, they can score 150, or they can just completely just lay an egg and just look horrible and score 89 points. It's just so interesting.
Do you like watching the Rockets?
See, here's the thing. Just from a stylistic perspective and an analytics perspective, I have a ton of respect for what they do, because I think that it is maximizing the advantages that the modern day game and the prevalence of the 3-pointer give you. But no, as a basketball purist, I think it sucks. I hate watching James.
What's your whole take on the officiating drama and Harden's calls?
Man, I mean, the drama is spreading across the playoffs right now, right? Like last night, I thought they were going to riot in Portland. They called a couple fouls in that Blazers game that was just like, wow, I can't believe some of these calls. But I mean, I don't know, man. I think it honestly goes back to what you're saying. Like, the drama in the NBA is so crazy, and I do find it entertaining and compelling. And when you're somebody that knows the personalities and the backstories of so many guys, most people that are watching the NBA, they don't know Enes Kanter's backstory. So when he's sitting there complaining, I think it feeds the machine of what people think of NBA. They're just like, oh, these guys are just rich whiners, shut up and play. I do think a lot of it. I mean, I think it's unfortunate that the officiating narrative is sort of stealing the storyline for what should be an all-time great series between the Rockets and the Warriors. But I also think the officiating and the choices of officials by the NBA has been somewhat questionable too. So I don't know. I think most of me think shut up and play, but I also think these guys do have a little bit of a legitimate beef. What do you think?
I mean, being an NBA ref would suck.
Totally.
The berating that they get from players is insane to me.
Yeah, that's the
amount of things that they can say to them is I think if they would try to cut that down a little bit, when Major League Baseball is all right, no more arguing balls and strikes. And so we get it every now and then, you see a bad, strike call and you see the guy talking to him and they let him say a little bit, but once they get over the line, it's an immediate, you're gone. I think the NBA should crack down a little bit on the berating of the officials and the amount of things that you're able to say to them. And then they would just end up just playing basketball a little bit more.
Right.
And, like, letting it go a little bit. But I also think that, like, there's a lot of plays in basketball where an NBA player is making a play to get a call instead of just making the play how you normally would if you're just playing basketball with your buddies. You know?
And the hierarchy of calls that are received is so frustrating, too. Like, James Harden gets more calls than Damian Lillard, and that just makes me mad when I watch it.
And I'm fine, like, you know, half of those, you know, when they're showing, like, the, you know, Harden's taking a jump shot and they land at his feet and stuff. Like, you have to let the shooter land, and some of those were legitimate fouls.
Right.
But mine is, like, when they're, you know, when you're, you know, going up and you go up at a weird angle, or you're moving your hands through to get a foul when you normally would just move your hands straight up, like those, and kicking your feet out, or the one where you're like coming around a screen and you catch the ball and then you just stop, and then the defender like barrels over the back of you because you just stop. Well, like, you don't do that in a nobody ever does that move in normal basketball. It's like those kind of moves where you're only doing it to try and bait into a call. Those are the ones that are a little bit frustrating to watch, and I wish that, like, they wouldn't reward those as much, and then the players wouldn't do it. They're only doing it because they're getting a foul call.
Right.
So if you just don't call it, then they'll stop doing it, and then the game will get a little bit cleaner.
And my biggest worry is that James Harden is scoring at a historic rate. He is unquestionably one of the best offensive players in the history of the NBA at this point. It's hard to say that he's not. But he does it in such an unappealing fashion, and he's a very one-of-a-kind player right now. He is certainly the best step-back three-point shooter in the history of the league. He is certainly the best at getting in the lane and drawing contact. I mean, he's shooting 12 free throws a game over the last 2 years. His free throw production is insane. But I also worry that he's going to form a generation of copycats, because then once there's 10 James Hardens in the league is going to be really hard to watch. I am much more of a purist as far as, you know, the high pick and roll stuff, letting the ball handlers go, a lot of the motion offense that the Warriors run, how well they pass it, the inside out stuff, a lot of transition in the secondary fast break stuff that LeBron brought into vogue. I do think the NBA is in a good place, though, and the playoffs without LeBron right now, to me, is pretty darn good. John and I put together a list of our top 25 players in the NBA right now about a year ago today. That list still holds some weight, and has some pretty funny ones up there, too. I definitely want to rescind my Ben Simmons ranking. So later on this week, we'll redo that. Hey, as I mentioned throughout the week, and I'll tease the ESPN Roundtable again this week, great ESPN Roundtable recorded this morning with 4 University of Montana standout track and field athletes from the women's team. Hannah Fauser from right here in Missoula, Montana. Erica McLeod from Butte, America. Morgan Solser from Billings. And Kylie Smidala from Helena. They joined me this morning. We'll air that interview at noon to 12:30 on Wednesday, as well as 5 o'clock right here, Tutel Nuanez 129 ESPN Missoula, as well as statewide SWX television. So stay tuned for that ESPN Roundtable. The main subject, the Big Sky Conference Outdoor Track and Field Championships, which will take place Wednesday through Saturday, Dorn Blazer Field. And if you're in the area, go check out Tagliari Deli. They got great sandwiches. They got great drinks. They got wine, a great selection. They also have a bunch of cured meats and delicious cheeses. So go check them out. And right now, we have a gift card for you. $15 at Tagliari Deli. If you give us a call right now, 329-1899. Number one caller will give you a $15 gift card to Tagliari Deli. Just give your information to Tommy. Tagliari Deli right there on the corner of Beckwith and Higgins. Jace Kluswich, one of the best track athletes in the state of Montana. He's only a sophomore at Frenchtown High. His times this last weekend broke some records, got him some attention from Notre Dame, and somehow, some way, Jace Kluswich and his family is the reason Sean Rainey lives in Montana. That's next.
Canyon River Golf Club is a must for any golfer in western Montana. Tucked away in a spectacular setting along the Clark Fork River in East Missoula, Canyon River offers one of Montana's best championship golf experiences. And Canyon River is happy to announce their new fleet of golf carts, which include the Shark Experience, an interactive GPS giving dynamic distances and touchscreen interaction to help you play your best. Plus, with Bluetooth, radio, and surround sound, you can enjoy yourself between holes, too. Book online at CanyonRiverGolfClub.com. Missoula's best golf, Canyon River.
This is is Mike Nugent with Berkshire Hathaway Home Services. Berkshire Hathaway provides Western Montana with full-time real estate professionals for you whenever you need us. Our reputation as the state's most knowledgeable and available real estate group has helped build unmatched trust in the Garden City and statewide. If you have been thinking of making a real estate move in the short or long term, give me a call. No pressure, no expectations. Just professional opinions and service at whatever pace you are comfortable with. Give me, Mike Nugent, a call today, 531-1802. And remember, every question is good to ask.
Alpine Touch is legendary around the state of Montana for providing delicious seasonings for every grilling occasion. Now, Alpine Touch offers so much more, from a savory new barbecue sauce to spicy pepper blends to tasty barbecue rubs. In addition to the classic, Alpine Touch has a variety of seasoning salts for whatever you need to spice up. Now that the holidays are over, Alpine Touch makes a perfect thank you gift to show your friends and relatives you love them. Alpine Touch, available at retail locations around Montana or online at alpinetouch.com. Alpine Touch, Montana's special spice.
Hey folks, Ryan Tutel here with Josh from The Advocates. If you've been in a car accident and need help dealing with the insurance company, you should give The Advocates a call.
It doesn't cost anything at all to call, and I'd be happy to talk with you about your situation. You don't want to have to be dealing with contacting the insurance companies and setting up your claim. We can do that for you from start to finish. We'll take the hassle out of the process so you can just focus on getting better.
There you go, folks. If you've been injured in an accident, give Josh a call, 640-4444, or online at montanaadvocates.com. There are a lot of lawyers, but you deserve an advocate.
Some so-called sports bars, you spend so much time fighting to see the TV, you're better off just staying home. Others show the game, but a basket of stale rye chips is not exactly your idea of a good game grub. At the Desperado, you get front row seats to every single spring baseball and NASCAR event, plus all the spring NBA and NHL postseason action. And with juicy burgers, ice-cold brews, and the best wings in town, you'll leave the Desperado satisfied whether your team won or lost. The Desperado Sports Tavern, where the emphasis is sports, food, and good times. On South Russell, across from the Y.
ESPN Missoula Sports Center.
Good evening. Colter Nuanez 129 ESPN Missoula. Alicia Breen and Brandon Weber, the Little Sullivan Award winners as Montana's top amateur athletes. The state's AAU chapter announced on Saturday. Breen, a Shoto native, averaged 21.4 points per game during her senior season at Montana State Buildings, earning first-team Division II All-American honors by leading the Yellow Jackets to the West Regional title on the way to the second Elite Eight appearance in school history. Weber, a native of Forsyth, won the NAIA National Wrestling Championship at 157 pounds while competing at Montana State Northern. The other female finalists included Haley Kopinga, a native of Billings who played volleyball at Rocky Mountain College, McKenna Morley, a Big Fork product who runs track at Colorado, and Sydney Stiles, a Bozeman native who currently plays at softball at Iowa State. The other male finalists, Jason McLean of Great Falls, who's an NDSU baseball player, Trace Tinkle out of Missoula Hellgate, who plays basketball at Oregon State, and Tucker Yates, a Colstrip product who just finished his career playing football at Montana State. The Montana softball team extended their win streak to 8 games, where they come from behind 10-6 win at Southern Utah to finish off a sweep of the Thunderbirds. The victory gives the Grizz the number 3 seed entering the Big Sky Conference tournament, which begins at Sacramento State on Wednesday. The Grizz take on 6th-seeded Northern Colorado at 12:30. And finally, the Missoula Osprey. 3 firework dates again this summer, July 3rd being the biggest one. Stick it here. I have more details for you next.
I'm the boy in your other phone, lighting up inside your drawer at home, all alone, pushing 40 in the friend zone. We talking and you walk away.
Oh, look at this. Tommy stops drinking coffee for 10 hours, and all of a sudden he's playing John Mayer. Turns over a new leaf.
Well, it seems like something Sean would really like. I wanted to, make him feel special.
First of all, a little copy editing apologies there. It's Sydney Stites, not Sydney Stiles, a Bozeman High product who plays for Jamie Pinkerton over at Iowa State. Apologies for Sydney for missaying her name in that sports center. Tommy, I'm always telling you, there's certain musical artists out there that they produce pop-like singles so that they can sell records and market themselves to the mindless masses while still being legitimate musical artists. John Mayer being one of them. The song you're playing right now is the John Mayer that you don't like, and I understand that because I don't like that either.
John Mayer as himself is a John Mayer that I do not like.
I know, Tommy, but you have to listen to some of the music because it's really good. He's really talented.
I don't know, Coulter. I think you're off shift, man. You got a screw loose up there or something.
Isn't he he's a big Montana visitor?
He
lives in Livingston,
the
right?
Paradise Valley, yeah, right outside of Livingston. He frequents a lot of establishments in downtown Bozeman. And, he wrote an album all about Montana. Tutel Nuanez 129 ESPN Missoula, broadcasting to you live from the Kurtz Polaris Studios. Kurtz Polaris, 2904 West Broadway in Missoula and Highway 83 in Sealy. Go check out their new line of summer vehicles, from ATVs to off-road vehicles. They got all the goodies down there at Kurtz Polaris. You can check them out, kurtzpolaris.com. Want to check us out online, 1029ESPN.com. You can also find us on Facebook, Facebook.com/ESPN Missoula. You can also check out all my journalism writing, SkylineSportsMT.com. Continuing our recruiting series there at Skyline Sports, catching up with a bunch of the recent signees for both the Cats and the Grizz, doing some profiles about them, just kind of the end of their senior years. Also got a couple track previews coming from Andrew Houghton as the Big Sky Conference Outdoor Track and Field Championships descends upon Missoula starting on Wednesday. Now it's time to get into our Prep Extra, presented to us by Farmers State Bank. And I want to talk a little bit about Jace Klusowicz. He is a sophomore at Frenchtown. I've been hearing a little bit about this kid. It's interesting when Montana athletes start to get buzz because, hey, have you heard about this kid? That's what people always say. You seen this kid run? I heard that Frenchtown's got a stud. And Klusowicz, his track times have been superb. He ran 11:06 in the 100 meters at the Kim Hines Invitational over the weekend. Kim Hines Invitational is a small school meet that was hosted at Missoula County Public Stadium. That 11:06 broke the meet record set by Drummond's Mark Estes a couple years back. Mark Estes, now playing wide receiver over there at Montana State. And Klusowicz, he also ran a 22:46 in the 200 to break Mark Estes' meet record in that event as well. Those are really good times. And
he's a sophomore.
He's a sophomore. And after the meet, got invites to both the Marshall and Notre Dame football camps. He's getting a ton of recruiting hype already. I know the Cats and the Grizz have both been in contact as well. But it seems like this kid, he was a freshman starter on the varsity football team. He was running really good times in track last year, and now it seems like he's a legitimate Class A favorite in both the sprints. He's a pretty put together kid. I know he's a good two-way guy, great athlete, but a crazy small world story. You essentially found your way to Missoula, Montana because of this kid's family. So we'll talk a little bit more about Klusowicz and his accomplishments a little bit after this, but tell the folks this story.
Yeah, I wouldn't be living in Montana if it wasn't for the Klusowicz family. So again, grew up in an hour outside of San Diego in a very small town, about 4,000 or 5,000 people. And the Klusowiczes were my neighbors. And so our parents were close. Jace's older sister, Stephanie, was in my sister's grade, and they were really good friends. And so we had, known them for a long time growing up. And then they moved back to Missoula in the Frenchtown area. And so we, came up to visit them, and I went to a Grizz football game and thought it was awesome. And so they kind of introduced me to Missoula. And so when I applied to a bunch of colleges, Montana was one of them, and ended up coming up here. And then the Klusowiczes have moved up here. And I remember playing, tackle football with Jace when he was 2 years old in the living room. And now I'm like going to a Frenchtown game and shooting his highlights. And it makes me feel really old, number one, but it's cool. It's just like such a small world thing that I just remember playing with this kid in his living room and going to Easter over there when 15 years ago. And now I'm covering him as he's become one of the best prospects in Montana.
That's awesome. It's a great small world story. And those times from this last weekend, those are the top times in Class A, as well as the top 5 times in the state. Casey Gunlickson from Sweetgrass County High School over in Big Timber, he is for sure going to be in the mix to break the Class B all-time 100-meter record. The 100-meter record in Class B is 11.06 seconds, and Gunlickson ran a 10.83 for a personal best at the Stillwater Al Walker Memorial Track meet. That's blazing fast. Flirting with 10.8, that's elite, really good. Connor Ryan out of Billings West, he's got the top time in AA at the Kelly Walsh Invitational. He ran a 10.9 flat. And Jaden Foster from Missoula Sentinel, another one of the AA guys that's gone under 11 seconds. He ran 10.94 at the Swede Dahlberg Invite over in Butte. But Klusewicz, he's sitting there number 1 in Class A and number 4 overall in the state with that 11:06 time ran this weekend. And his 200 time at 22.46 is 5th in the state. Connor Ryan from Billings West, the only kid in the state of Montana to go under 22 seconds, 21.94 at that same Kelly Walsh. Chase Sheldon Allen from Flathead, he's 22.32 seconds in the 200. And Jane Foster at that Swede Dahlberg Invitational in Butte, he also ran a great time, 22.34. So very competitive times. But I thought it was interesting because 406sportsmt.com, they did a story on Jace Klusewicz and his wins at the Kim Hines Invite. And that's where the hook from the Notre Dame and Marshall football camps came from. But he said, hey, I know these times are really good in track, but I'm a football guy. I love football. I want to play college football. I kind of just do track to stay in shape and on the side. So you're a guy that's watched a lot of college football. What do you think of him as just a prospect? It seems like he's a legitimate potential, maybe borderline FBS guy.
Yeah, he's a playmaker for sure. He's kind of, if I had to do a comp to him, it's Robbie Houck. Because Jace isn't huge. He's trying to put on weight
about
as
5'10",
much.
170 right now, right?
Yeah, so he's a little bit on the smaller end. He likes playing defense. So he wants to play safety more than he does offense. At least that was the last time I talked to him a couple months ago. But I mean, he'll go in there and stick you. And I've shot multiple Frenchtown games, and you go, and it's pretty clear that he's the best athlete on the field. I went down there when a couple Grizz coaches were there recruiting him, and in the first half, because usually I only have time to shoot the first half, and then I got to run back and put it all together for the show. He had, I think, a 70-yard touchdown catch, a 100-yard pick six, and forced a fumble, and had a second interception where he almost returned it for a touchdown. And so, he is definitely a playmaker. I talked to his dad a lot too, and he always asked me because I'm kind of what I do, and he's like, "What do you think? What do you think we should do?" and things like that. He's kind of, to me at this point, I mean, who knows in the next couple of years how much bigger he gets or whatnot. But he always asked me I know kind of the bigger school appeal sounds exciting and things like that, but he also knows that we've had the conversation if you go to a Montana as opposed to an Oregon, and you end up playing a lot and being an all-conference guy, is that going to be, more fun for you and better for your career than going to an Oregon and where you're, maybe fighting for a spot, and then you're just a special teams guy and you never really see the field. You're going to Oregon and it's got the glitz and the glamour and things like that, but you're not one of the dudes. And so, it's kind of to me, he's one of those fringe guys, kind of maybe a Gabe Sulcer, where Gabe could have definitely gone to a bigger school, but then maybe he's not playing as much, where you go to a Montana and then you can kind of end up being the guy. And I think Gabe Sulcer's a guy that will end up being that once Jerry Louis McGee's gone and he gets more playing time.
Text from a loyal listener. He said that Klusewicz is training with Doug Leffler. Leffler was a phenomenal athlete out of Frenchtown High School, threw the javelin, was one of the best javelin throwers, quite honestly, in the entire country by the time his college career was done. And I know Doug does a great job with the young kids, too. So that'll give him a little bit of an inside track as well, kind of having a guy to help him.
He goes over to Seattle and plays on a lot of those football teams with a lot of big-time competition. So you ask him, I remember I did a story on him last year, and I'm like, hey, you're a freshman. You're starting on varsity. You're a freshman, and you're running up against it was Drew Turner from Glacier when he's running the 100 against Drew Turner, who's a very intimidating looking guy. And he goes, well, honestly, it's not as intimidating as when I go to Seattle and play against the best of the best in those quote unquote AAU type football camps and things like that. So he's put in positions where he's playing in a lot of competitive situations in the off season. So to him, coming back to Montana, it's just not as intimidating. So he's definitely not scared of anything.
He will definitely be one to keep an eye on. Good luck to Jace Klusewicz. Actually sounds like he got an invite from Ohio State to go to their camp as well. So real deal prospect. If he can go show out those camps, he might be a guy that's going on to bigger and better things. But also, that's the type of guy where if Bobby Houck or Jeff Choate can get him secured, that could be a guy that can really be an impact guy. And also, as we know, fan favorites always for the local kids. Sean Rainey in studio with me, Colter Nuanez, 129 ESPN Missoula. Tutel Nuanez, Ryan Tutel, he's out. But that doesn't mean anything. We got all sorts of free stuff for you guys the next 2 weeks. We'll tell you more about it next.
Tutel and Nuanez. All guests join.
This Mother's Day, treat the Montana mom in your life to the Montana Club's famous Mother's Day buffet. She'll be dazzled as she savors everything from slow-roasted prime rib and glazed ham to fresh berry crepes and lemon bars. If mom wants to sleep in, bring her in later for our artfully crafted Mother's Day dinner specials like brandy peppercorn filet and steak and Maine lobster tail. Mother's Day buffet 8 to 2, followed by Mother's Day dinner specials 3 to close. The Montana Club on Brooks and North Reserve, Missoula.
Les Schwab is proud to introduce two of our best tires ever just in time for summer. There's our exclusive open range AT that we believe is our quietest, smoothest, and best all-season traction tire ever. Or the Reputation, our exclusive high-mileage premium passenger tire. Get $50 off alignment when you purchase a set of 4 open range AT or Reputation tires. Book an appointment today at leschwab.com. Les Schwab Tires. Doing the right thing matters. Cannot be combined with other offers. Limited time only. See details at leschwab.com.
On Russell, across from the fairgrounds.
No matter how far you may go, there's always one just down the road. Town Pump, who pump it up, pump it up.
If you're looking for the perfect snack and drink combo, then you need to stop into your local Town Pump, where you can get a 12-pack of Corona for $14.99 and a delicious fresh wrap in our deli for only $3.49. Town Pump Food Stores, proud to be part of our community.
Hey folks, the best season of the year is upon us. That's right, it's tax return season, and there's one place to have the most fun and make that refund check stretch further than anywhere else, Selway Armory. Selway Armory has the largest selection of firearms, ammo, and accessories of anywhere around, and they have the expertise to go with it. It's not everywhere that you can shop local and save money, but Selway Armory will meet or beat any box store price, and your money stays in Montana. It's tax return time, so get more bang for your buck at Selway Armory. Visit online at selwayarmory.com.
Hey there, Colter Nuanez from Tutel Nuanez 1029 ESPN Missoula, here with Tom from Aspen Sound. Tom got me a great deal on an automatic car starter this winter. Now it's summer. What sort of stuff you guys got going on down there, Tom?
Well, Colter, coming into the summertime, we're picking up on the window tinting front. So if you need your windows tinted, give us a call. We'll get you scheduled up. Boats and ATVs are starting to come in full swing, and we're also starting to see the hot rods come out to play. Anything audio related, let us know. We'll get you taken care of.
Feel the music at Aspen Sound.
If it matters to Missoula, it matters to us. Ryan Tutel and Colter Nuanez on 102.9 ESPN Radio.
Conversation. She's coming in 12:30 flight. The moonlit wings reflect the stars that guide me towards salvation. I stopped an old man along the way, hoping to find some old forgotten.
Tutel Nuanez 129 ESPN Missoula. Ryan Tutel, he's out for 2 weeks, but Colter Nuanez holding down the fort. Sean Rainey, he was in studio. He had to take off a little bit early, though. He is on his way to his little boy's t-ball game. So I told him, no need to stick around. I'm just going to tell the great, fine folks of Montana all the free stuff we're going to give them the next couple days and next couple weeks, for that matter. But Sean, he'll be in here Tuesday and Wednesday as well, working on Regime Seabrook for Thursday and Friday. For sure, he's going to be here on Friday. So Thursday, stay tuned for that. And then next week, hoping to get Tucker Sargent back in studio as well, now that his lacrosse season is over. Tommy, how you feeling with no caffeine?
Man, I honestly feel really great today.
Isn't that okay? So this is the thing. It's like it's a crutch that you think you have and need. But so for those, we haven't really talked about this yet. So Tommy drinks more coffee than anybody alive. I drink a lot of caffeine, and I don't really think that it's that good for me. And I don't think that Tommy thinks it's that good for him either. So we are uniting to wean ourselves, at least cut back a little bit. I did have some coffee early before my interview this morning, but I've not had any caffeine since, and I'm feeling pretty darn good. And Tommy, you haven't had any since your morning coffee either, right?
Yeah, correct. I've had that 1 cup, and that was all. Just water.
Now you're drinking water. You're getting super hydrated.
Yeah, it really helps. I can function. I can form a sentence and speak generally coherently, at least at this point. So I think it's a good move, man. I mean, to go from 13, 14 cups a day to going, why am I so tired, and why am I withering away, to feeling pretty good. It's a change that's worth the effort to make. At least I can say at this time.
Got to stay strong with each other, brother.
That's right, man.
Anybody that's watched us on the YouTube live stream that Tommy put together or right here, SWX Montana, you realize that I'm almost always drinking some sort of yerba mate tea or guarasa tea, some high caffeine tea, and during this show, and I just, I'm just trying to scale it back a little bit. I think that has an effect on why I can't go to sleep until 12:30 or 1 o'clock in the morning every night. So maybe honing it in. We're gonna be brand new men by the time Ryan Tutel comes back.
Yeah, it'll be a really weird transition when he returns.
If he returns. Well, that's why we're having all of my friends in here, because we're having auditions in case Tutel buys a fish farm. We might have Nuanez and Evans and friends from here on out.
I don't get where this fish farm thing ever even came from,
because his wife calls him on the FaceTime and says, my family's got a fish farm for sale. It only costs 10 zillion Filipino pesos. We're going to buy it. And Ryan's reluctant, to say the least. But we all know how that goes. I think Tina is going to win the negotiation at the end of the day. So we'll see if Ryan returns. But either way, in the meantime, between now and when Ryan Tutel comes back, we got all sorts of free stuff for everybody. So stay tuned right here, ESPN Missoula 102.9, ESPN, or statewide SWX Television. We are in the next 2 weeks, and we'll give you all the details on how to win this stuff. We're still kind of putting the competitions and the various listening exercises together, but we got a raft trip for 2 from Adventure Montana. Give you 2 seats on a raft. You pick the time and the date anytime this summer. So that'll be great. Get a guided whitewater rafting trip this week. I know everybody's been procrastinating buying your Mother's Day gifts, so we got you covered. Soul Skin, they've given us 2 $100 gift cards and a $50 gift card. So we'll have giveaways each of the next 3 days for that to take care of you for your Mother's Day. Soul Skin has great amenities, facials, and all sorts of other stuff that your mom is sure to love. And then we also have a stay-and-play getaway, the Headwaters Golf Course and the Sacagawea Inn over in Three Forks. So that'll be tremendous as well. It's 36 holes of golf with a room at one of the nicest hotels in all of Montana. And you get a rental car as well. And you get a bucket of balls to get warmed up. It's a good deal. So over the next 2 weeks, keep it tuned right here. We'll have all that free stuff for you. Man, it flies by when you're driving the seat and you don't have to look at Ryan Tutel. It's amazing how fast that show went. But stick with us rest of the week. Sean Rainey, he'll be in studio the next 2 days. We are going to be breaking down and revisiting our list of our top 25 players in the NBA. We had one last year, and it looks pretty accurate and also pretty funny right now as the league continues to evolve. And we'll also be joined in studio, Dan Nile, head coach of the Big Sky track and field teams. It's the city championship meet at Missoula County Public Stadium on Friday. And Big Sky Conference Outdoor Track and Field Championships. Thanks for being with us. Tutel Nuanez, 129 ESPN Missoula.
Canyon River Golf Club is a must for any golfer in western Montana, tucked away in a spectacular setting.